Neil, we live?
Yeah.
You guys can see me. Welcome back to another great Off the Lip radio show. We're live back at the boardroom. If you guys are on Instagram, Santa Cruz Boardroom has a new Instagram page called Santa Cruz Boardroom.
What happened to the other one?
It got kidnapped. It's so weird. The Russians stole our Instagram.
Those bastards.
And the problem is that we don't have, I can't get the ransom letter because we don't have the email that's associated with the page. So the ransom letter's been going to some random email. So we're starting over. So Santa Cruz Boardroom on Instagram. Tonight, Neil, we got big controversy. I feel like
the talk of the town.
The talk of the town.
Right.
There's people who are seriously passionate,
vicious.
There's all emotions attached with Measure D, and we will talk about Measure D. It has to do with our railway corridor here in Santa Cruz County. It's a hot topic. We're going to educate you. So hopefully in this June ballot and the election coming up, you can make the right decision and vote what you think might be the best.
And whatever side you choose, don't be an ass.
Well, and that's important too.
Right?
You know, like
you said something on Facebook, you got lit up like a Christmas tree.
I got called a leftist libtard just because I was like, I don't know, is that right? And they're like, oh, you freaking leftist libtard, and I was like, so yeah, if you got an opinion on it, respect the other's opinion.
Be nice.
Be nice, yeah.
Right.
So with us,
chair over that way, TC. So I'm
okay. Tonight we have Mark Mesiti-Miller, co-chair of the No on D. Correct?
That is correct.
Welcome, Neil. I'm gonna grab a drink of water. Step in.
Okay. Hang on. TC's injured. How's your arm, TC? Thanks for coming.
You're welcome, Neil.
So
glad to be here.
Bill Maxfield said you should come down and be on the show.
He did.
Did he warn you about anything?
He just said have a good time because he's Neil and TC are a couple
Does he
of
say
good
that
guys.
really?
Yeah, he did. He actually did. He thought that you guys are a couple of fun guys and this would be a fun radio show. And I'm here to have some fun.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, you bet.
I'm glad you're here. Can you explain to us, for the layman, from people watching, to the layman, what Measure? Can we kick it off by asking what Measure D is?
Of course. Yeah.
Measure. Start there.
Yeah. I'm game. Measure D is a measure that's on the June ballot here in Santa Cruz County. It's a countywide ballot. And the measure would effectively remove the railroad tracks between Santa Cruz and Watsonville and replace them, or try and replace them, with a trail. And the way they will do that is by amending the general plan, which is the guiding document for everything that happens in Santa Cruz County. They would amend it so that the only possible use of the rail corridor is for a trail. So there'd be no way that the county would allow any other use of the trail but bikes, pedestrians, skateboards, and such things that roll human powered.
Right.
No buses, no trains,
right.
No public transit on the rail corridor.
Nothing.
Just
a trail.
The end. Forever.
And that's it?
That's it. That's what Measure D is all about. And of course, there are a lot of consequences to that, and we could talk about those.
Let's talk about top 3 consequences.
Top 3. Number 1, we will never, ever have a robust public transit system in our county.
Robust about being a train?
Meaning an interconnected bus train network. So there was a study done, just completed last year, called the Transit Corridor Alternatives Analysis. And what it revealed was that by adding a train between Santa Cruz and Watsonville and tying it in with our bus network, we would increase public transit use countywide by 150%. The number of people using public transit every day would go from about 13,700 to about 34,400, an increase of 21,000 rides every single day. 21,000 less cars on the road.
From Watsonville to Santa Cruz.
That's the train would go from Watsonville to Santa Cruz and be tied into the bus system. So that's what's kind of at stake.
What do you think, TC?
Number 1.
Number 2,
Roaring Camp. Everybody knows Roaring Camp. Well, at least people around here know Roaring Camp. Roaring Camp operates as a branch rail line that operates off of the Santa Cruz branch rail line, which is the line that is the subject of Measure D. But Roaring Camp is a railroad company, and they have a beach train that runs from Felton to Santa Cruz and stops in front of the boardwalk, and it's a huge tourist attraction. I think they move hundreds of thousands of people every year. That beach train would end. Roaring Camp's business would be gravely harmed, because they rely on the connection to the National Rail Network. Their business uses rolling stock, locomotives, cars, other things that roll on railroad tracks. They really can't be moved on the highway. So over time, Roaring Camp's business will certainly be damaged. And of course, Roaring Camp is vehemently opposed to Measure D.
Right.
Number 3, the third, probably most important impact, in my opinion, is we do nothing to fight climate change. We are, by approving Measure D, we are confining ourselves to an auto-centric future along Highway 1, which is the only other major transportation corridor in our county. And if you live here, you know Highway 1 is a nightmare. And Highway 1 will only become a worse nightmare as time goes by if we don't do something to give people an alternative to driving around in cars. And of course, that has huge impacts on our climate. And, climate, if you haven't noticed, the globe is warming. The climate crisis is real. It is nipping at our heels if really it's breathing down our necks. And so that would be the third most important impact.
Does Roaring Camp rent the tracks in front of the boardwalk?
Roaring Camp has a lease agreement to rent the tracks in front of the boardwalk. That's correct.
And is that going to the city financials?
The lease agreement is between the Regional Transportation Commission and Roaring Camp.
Which they own the rest of the trail. They own the Regional Transportation Commission. RTC owns the rest of the railroad tracks.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, the County of Santa Cruz, the Regional Transportation Commission owns the railroad tracks.
Do you think we're going to get people out of their cars to go to get on this train?
Do I think people
Yeah.
will?
Yeah.
I absolutely think people will. That people already are looking for alternatives to driving around in cars. You can see that in every community in Santa Cruz. People are trying to figure out how to avoid driving their cars. It's a nightmare, and it's expensive, and it takes forever to get anywhere. And so people are right now seeking ways to get out of their cars. And if we provide them a better way to get around that doesn't require a car, the studies have shown it, but when you talk to people, they're like, I would love it, especially people in South County who are stuck in traffic for 90 minutes each way.
All those people in South County going to Santa Cruz, or are they going over the hill?
Those people in South County are going to Santa Cruz principally. The total volume of traffic on Highway 1 every day is about 90,000 cars. About 40,000 cars go over the hill and not just from Watson-Boga, but from the entire county. There are 50,000 vehicles that come into Santa Cruz every day, into the city, across the city boundary. There's 30,000 a day that come in on Soquel, 20,000 a day come in across the Harbor Bridge. Actually, more than 50,000 cars are traveling across the Santa Cruz city boundary. Most of those people are going to work. Some 20,000 people every day come to Santa Cruz to work. The numbers are staggering.
I grew up in England. I grew up with trains. It was a big, I had a car but never used it.
How did you like that?
Oh, it was great. But the thing that I had connections. I went.
Yep.
I got on Brighton. I got in the station at Brighton. Took the 8:00 nonstop to Victoria Station. When I got to Victoria Station, I had a tube, I had a bus, or I had a taxi that was going to take me to where my destination was going to be. After I left Victoria Station, which is in the south part of London.
Absolutely lovely. Did that work well for you?
It worked great for me, but I'm just wondering here, do we have the connections here? Are we going to have the connection? The train's going to stop in Capitola, the train's going to stop in outside O'Neill's, the train's going to stop maybe a little further down in Seabright. What are the connections for people to end their journey?
The same connections you had will be here.
You think?
Absolutely. And the best thing about the way transportation's imagined in California is that we are part of the California State Rail Plan, which is a mobility plan for all of California. And that plan is being rolled out right now and is intended to be completed by 2040, which will transform California into effectively the Switzerland of North America. And it will connect everywhere in California with everywhere else in California. And the plan is to basically get the same number of people moving around in California as currently move along Interstate 5 from the Mexican border to the Oregon border. That's the result of the California State Rail Plan. And we are part of that. Our branch line is part of the State Rail Plan. So when you look into the future, you can see that rail gives us the ability to move around, not only here in our county, but to Monterey, to places elsewhere in California without a car free.
So you see, you were just in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
And they had the Tesla
Tunnel?
The Tesla
Yeah, I went
tunnel.
in. Yeah,
right?
it was awesome. I mean, I to be a bit of a devil's advocate, for discussion. There's great example today. My wife and I drove around town, and I told her you were going to be on the show tonight, and she goes, "Well," she envisions we have 90 years combined living on the tracks. My fence falls on the corridor, and my wife was born and raised in my house, and I've lived there 40 years. But today, as an experiment, we wanted to count bicycles on the road. Not just to count the bikes, to count how many were electric. 2/3 of the bikes we saw today were electric. And I was shocked by that because 4 years ago, an electric bike was an anomaly. I went to Vegas and rode the Tesla tunnel, which currently they have drivers because of legal schmeagle stuff, but they're going to be self-driven cars. And I thought to myself, again, being a devil's advocate about the corridor, of the self-driving cars, where you actually do get off and it takes you to work. And I was like, well, that's kind of neat. So getting back just to full circle, I wanted to ask about rail banking, because I've noticed with the rail banking question that comes up, that once the tracks are gone, we'll never put tracks in again. And I question that, whether financially it's available. I don't know all what's going on with this, but I know that part of what the Yes campaign is they want to take the tracks out and have a walking path and a bicycle path next to it, from what I understand. Or electric skateboards, electric bikes can be on one side, and humans can walk on the other with strollers or what have you. If the tracks are gone, we can't put self-driving cars on there as a taxi bus sort of art, because I think our buses are too big for how many people ride them. Personally, I rarely have ever seen a transit bus full of our big buses that are currently on the road. I see a future of small cars taking 4 or 5 people, little, like that thing that was on the tracks, the one that you guys did, there was the electric train.
Yeah.
I see a smaller version of that even, that gets off and takes you down to Pacific Avenue, like an Uber, electric Ubers or something. Is that something that could ever work on there?
Yeah, you've hit up a lot of issues here. First, I think rail banking is something that few people understand well.
What is that rail banking? I was reading about that.
So rail banking is a legal fiction that was created by Congress in 1983. And that's about 40 years ago. And what rail banking allowed was a way for rail corridors, abandoned rail corridors, to be preserved, the continuity of the corridor be preserved, the tracks removed, and trails installed. It was not, it's the rail banking term is misleading because it doesn't bank the rail line. All it does is protect the right of way. And in the last 40 years, almost 40 years, about 23,000 miles of track have been removed in the United States and trails put down where the tracks once were. And not a single mile of track, a single mile of trail has ever been removed and tracks put back. So the idea that it's banked and saved for later is really, it's not practical. It's not the reality. The reality is that once the tracks are pulled, they're gone. They don't come back. And so that's the rail banking issue in a nutshell.
Do the current tracks work for what we want to do on the tracks as far as transportation goes?
The current rail corridor needs some work in order to carry passenger rail at sufficient speed. But replacing the steel rails with new rail, replacing the ties if needed, is an automated system. This is done routinely all the time. They will have a machine come by, literally a machine come by, pull up the old tracks, put down the new tracks. It's fast, it's efficient. It's not unlike replacing the roof on your house. You basically pull up the old shingles, put down new shingles. It's not automated. Roofs are not automated yet, but rail is automated. The big machines, these are giant machines that do this kind of work routinely.
We have the money to do that. We have the money to do that.
The money is not currently available to implement rail. That's a different problem. But I want to get back to the car idea. So you have this idea, TC, right?
Yes. Yep.
You have this idea that cars could do the same thing.
Or like a rickshaw, electric rickshaw or something, Yeah.
Right. But you're saying you could move those people. So this transit corridor alternatives analysis that I referenced earlier, they looked at 18 different ways of moving people along the rail corridor. It was a joint effort by the Regional Transportation Commission and the Metro. The Metro is the bus operators. Mm-hmm. And so they were seeking the best way to move people along the rail corridor. And they looked at, people movers. There's a special name for that. Autonomous people movers. They looked at ollies. They looked at what they call bus trains. These are like, the things that you were talking about that could leave the corridor and go somewhere else. They looked at 18 different options for how to move people along the rail corridor. And what they found was that rail, electric rail, was the best by far, most reliable, most efficient, most inexpensive. And when you look at the total cost of operating, there were 13 advantages listed in the report of why electric rail made sense. And both the bus operators and the transportation planners, they both agreed. And this is what is the best use of the rail corridor. And when you get the rail corridor going, you're not just using it for rail, you're putting a trail alongside. And there's examples of the trail already completed. I don't know if either of you, Neil or TC, have been over to the west side of Santa Cruz or down to Watsonville. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're proposing. I mean, that's not what we're proposing. That's what the plan is to build a 12 to 16 foot wide trail alongside the existing rail line. And that is proving to be more than adequate.
And safe.
And absolutely safe. Absolutely safe. People love it. I mean, people use it all the time. And it's getting huge amounts of usage.
And is that because behind my house, I used to have an office. And when the train went by, back when we used to have freight trains, my wife made me get out of my office. Because if the train fell over, it'd kill me. It doesn't have to derail. It just had to fall over. The corridor, what I'm getting at is I live by J Street Park. The corridor is very narrow through there.
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I'm familiar.
And I don't know if there is 16 feet and where those tracks are placed, if there's room. And I'm not, you're the professional.
Right.
That's why I'm asking. Is that possible?
I'm looking forward to answering this question because this is the story of how I first got involved. I'm a professional civil engineer. I don't know if you guys were aware of that. I didn't really tell you about that. And back in 1997, there was a few of us, cyclists basically, that said to each other, wouldn't it be great if we could put a trail alongside the rail and we'd have a car-free place to ride our bikes? And I said, well, that's a good idea, but before we go too far, we should see if there's enough room. And so I put my civil engineering hat on, and I got a couple of other friends of mine that understood civil engineering, and we all got together and we got the plans for the rail line, the 32 miles of rail line. And we looked at every sheet. This is back before AutoCAD. This is back in the day when you put a scale on top of the paper and you made notes and all that stuff. And we went through a couple inches of drawings, and we measured the rail corridor, the entire rail corridor. We created this big matrix, and we looked at the rail corridor, and we found that along that whole 32 miles, there was enough room to put a 17-foot wide freight rail. That's the operating envelope for a freight rail, and an 8-foot wide trail minimum. But most of it is wide enough for 12. So your particular spot where you're living is a 30-foot wide corridor. That's how wide the corridor is there. I know because I know that area. And so if you take a 30-foot wide corridor and you subtract 17 feet, which you need for the operating envelope for a train, you have 13 feet left over. So you easily have enough room for a 12-foot wide trail. And a 12-foot wide trail That's the widest paved trail we would have in the county.
And so if
That's
somebody's
it. There's
walking,
nothing
'cause
wider.
the train's wider than the tracks.
The operating envelope. No, the train is not actually wider than the. Well, wait. Repeat that.
What I saw traveling down the tracks
Was it-
looked to me it was wider than the rails.
Oh yeah, the rails are 5'4" and 4.5 inches. That's the center to center distance on the track.
Right.
And the vehicles are always wider than the tracks.
So when somebody are we going to have a separation between train and people?
It depends on how we manage that. But right now, the master plan shows a cable rail or a split rail fence going between the tracks and the
people.
and the
So there is
and
a
the
fence
pedestrian
going to be
path.
there. No, so little Johnny's not going to run out in front of the train.
Little Johnny's not going to run out in front of the train. In fact, you brought up this issue about safety and trains falling over and all that. And the reality is, the truth, if you look at the facts, trains are by far the safest way to move things around. Whether you're talking about freight trains or people movers, they are like 17 times safer than driving around in a car.
I've
or
only
moving.
seen 3 derailments in my life.
Sorry?
I've only seen 3 derailments in my life on that corridor.
Yeah, and it's extraordinarily rare. They are the safest way to move around, whether you're moving people or freight. They're the safest way to move around. Far safer than cars or trucks.
It seems to me just some of the things that I've noticed is that is it about a 10-year timeline? Is that what we're talking about to get an actual train moving people on that track?
The train from the day you say let's do this, the Transit Corridor Alternative Analysis, the same document that the professionals put together, they estimated it would be 12 to 14 years before a train would be operating.
Okay.
So
And that's because
That-
I know like the Soquel Creek Bridge, it looks like it's going to fall down in a good wind.
So is the
right
one
now.
at Capitola, though.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
the
So-
Capitola Trestle,
Yeah.
the famous Capitola Trestle.
Yeah, it always comes up. I mean, because it is a rusty. I mean, it's hepatitis. It looks like to me. It's
Manu quoted $6 million to fix that bridge.
Yeah, that's a bargain. If you can fix it for $6 million, that's a bargain.
that's a bargain.
Yeah, I actually think that, I'm going to throw a little engineering term out here, but most people will be able to understand that. The Capitola Trestle is reaching the end of its useful service life.
Oh yeah.
So everybody gets that, right? It's like things don't last forever. Many people don't know that the Capitola Trestle was a used bridge when it arrived in Capitola and was constructed. It came from somewhere else. It had already been in service, and it was relocated here. So that bridge is well over 100 years old. And so since things don't last forever, we have an opportunity to replace that Capitola Trestle with something really marvelous. And if you're an engineer like me and you pay attention to bridges, which I do, there are some absolutely gorgeous bridges that I can imagine being in Capitola that would be so much more beautiful.
At
than
the
what we have
cost of
now.
how much, do you think?
Well, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, the cost of a new bridge is something that I'm an engineer, so I don't just make up stuff. But it would be expensive, certainly expensive. It'd be millions of dollars.
Do we raise taxes?
But it would be
for that?
worth it.
Is that a tax increase or?
Ooh, let's talk about taxes.
Yeah, I mean that's great.
That's
question.
one of the great myths about all of this. The old way of thinking about transportation improvements is, well, you have to raise taxes, right? That's the only way you can do it. And in fact, in 2016, we passed a tax measure to fund 30 years worth of transportation improvements in our county. That measure is going to raise about $700 million. About a quarter of that is for the rail and trail project. So that's a significant amount of money, but that's not enough. So the rest of the money will come from the federal government and the state government. And transportation projects are one of those projects where the classic mix is about a 4-to-1. So for every dollar you raise locally, you get about $4 from somewhere else. It's about a 20% match. Although the Monterey County, our neighbor to the south of us, the Transit Agency of Monterey County, they just finished a Kickstarter rail project in their county. They funded that with 3% local match. So it's a $94 million project. They put in about $4.5 million of local money. And now they've got a new rail station in Salinas. They're building one in Castroville. They're trying to get one done here in Popperville, Watsonville. But let's talk about the mechanisms for raising local money. The new way of raising money for public transportation is best example is in Portland. So many people here on the west coast of the United States are familiar with Portland.
Been there.
You've been there. So
Many
they have a great public transportation system. But guess what? They're not happy with it, right? It could be better. And so they decided that they were going to expand their public transportation system to make it even better than it already is, so that people can really get by without cars. And we can really start making a dent in climate change. We can really start fighting global warming. And they got together with 30 different organizations from across their county. And the object of this...
What kind of organizations?
Everybody. I mean, Friends of the Railing Trail, social equity groups, I don't know. I'd have to pull up the report to cite the 30, but they're like 30 different community organizations, community groups with a stake who wanted to improve the situation. And they charged them with figuring out how to fund the expansion of their public transportation system. And after a year and a half, they put their heads together. They came up with 10 ways of raising money to expand their public transportation system. Not one of them involved a sales tax. Not one. Not one of them involved a parcel tax. What they did do is they came up with things like congestion pricing, putting a price on parking. And the beauty of this, they call it pricing options for equitable mobility. And the goal of this was to raise money in a way that changes people's behavior, that rewards good behavior, and penalizes bad behavior. So that's the strategy they adopted. And it's not aggressive. Sales taxes, as everyone knows, are regressive. They hurt the poorest people the most. So we have to come up with new ways of thinking about this, ways that are more equitable, that raise money without hurting people, and actually create behavior change that is beneficial not just to the environment, but also to equity, that levels the playing field for everyone. And that's where we need to go. That's where Santa Cruz County, in fact, the whole state of California, in fact, much of the world, probably needs to just shift the way they think about funding transportation.
Do you think the population of Santa Cruz is going to want the local government to fix the roads, which are shockingly bad around here, faster or more so than the rail trail program that we have here? Because the infrastructure that we have going around any street you go down nowadays, the roads are just
I can't even get a trash can out here on the sidewalk.
Right? I mean, do we want to fix?
I know that problem.
Do we want to fix what we have in place already? Because my road's bad. This road's 41st Avenue. You go down, it's terrible.
The only answer I can offer you is that in 2016, the people of the county of Santa Cruz voted to tax themselves for a balanced mix of improvements, which included fixing our roads and included additional money for the bus system, and included money for a rail trail, and included money to maintain the rail line, and included money even for a wildlife crossing of 17, which, by the way, just broke ground this week.
I donated
know
that. We did a skateboard contest and raised money for that.
Yeah. And so it's not an either or proposition. A lot of people think that way, Neil. It's not an uncommon thing. Like, well, we can't do this because we have to do that. But it's not a zero-sum game. We have to start thinking about things comprehensively and holistically, and we need to take care of everybody. One person can't win at the expense of somebody else. One group of people can't win at the expense of someone else. We have to pull together. We have to pull together, and we have to shape and create the kind of community we want to be. And we all get a say in that. And the more people we invite to the table to have a say in it, the better the results are going to be. It's a collaborative model. And that's a different way of thinking about things than the traditional models. But that's how we have to think to go forward if we want to make things really better.
Do we have a cost of what it's going to, in 14 years when they break ground on this? Do we know how much it's going to cost to do this?
The current, the TCAA also provided a cost estimate for implementing electric passenger rail. They had two different versions of it. It ranged from, I think, $470 to $485 or something like that. So I like to think about it as a $475 million project. But you have to remember that we're at a very high level, that cost estimate had $130 million of contingency in it. So that, just to give you, most people don't understand how plans unfold on projects like this. You start pretty high level, you put big contingencies in it. When you add 130 million, that means it could be 130 million less, but it probably won't be any more. And the other thing you have to remember when you talk about these big numbers is you have to remember two things. Number one, that's not our money. Our money is going to be 20% of that or some fraction of that, our local share. the federal government and the state government will pick up the rest, because the state government has an interest. The state rail, they want the state rail plan to happen. They want to reduce our carbon emissions. They want to get people to move around without cars.
Will it cost less than it does to drive?
Well, yes, absolutely will cost less than it will to drive, because here's how public transit works. Basically, if you think about this is the way it works for most people. You buy what is called an all-access pass. So you probably, being from London, would be familiar with this, where you have an all-access pass that gives you access to all the public transit modes, whatever one that might be. So when you get to your station and you want to switch to the bus, you don't have to pull out another $20 or $10, $5 or whatever it is. You just hop on the bus with your card, same card, all works. And that's how this will work. So an all-access transit pass, if you look at nearby communities in California that have all-access transit passes, they range in cost. They're like $125, maybe $150, $175, somewhere in that range. And for that price, you get to ride the light rail, you get to ride the bus, you get the, whatever. There's even places that they include the Uber and, the ride sharing. I mean, that's an included feature. We haven't designed that for our system yet. We don't know really what's going to be involved. But the point is that it'll be a lot less than owning a car. If you look at the cost of owning a car ownership, if you believe the AAA figures, it's about $800, $900 a month to own a car. Now that's depreciation, insurance, tax, all that stuff.
It's also $2 million to own a house.
And it's also, really good point. But it's a significant cost. And if you're not in the upper echelons of our socioeconomic class, it's tough to pay for a car. Even if you're using a used car, you're still spending like $500 a month. And that's just what it costs. But if you could replace a car for an all-access transit pass, and maybe you're a two-car family, you get rid of one of your cars, you can save some significant money. And a few $100s a month goes a long ways to feeding your family, to paying for the other things you need.
A number of people going to lose their property because of the different direction this has to take, or some change that has to...
No one will lose property.
Nobody.
Everything fits inside the existing rail corridor.
Not even Alton Aptos?
Nobody.
It's pretty thin over there. It's pretty squeezed in over there.
I've looked at the right-of-way maps.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why we can't fit it all in the rail corridor. There will be places where you're going to want to acquire additional land for different purposes, when you build out a system like this.
Parking
is one. You may not need additional land for that, but we can talk about it as a separate topic. But think about where the rail corridor is now. Many parts of the rail corridor are right alongside streets. They're along parks. They're along already publicly owned lands. In other words, you're not having to acquire private land. You can just use a piece of public land that you already have. And much of the rail corridor has those kinds of opportunities along it. It's a 32-mile long corridor.
I hate to see J Street Park turn into a parking lot.
J Street Park will not turn into a parking lot.
Okay.
Well, it's owned by a
Guarantee
school district, so
Yeah.
that's a problem in itself. But yeah,
There are lots of problems in our transportation system. And
there's no perfect solution.
There is no perfect solution. But having an integrated, robust public transportation system has a lot of benefits. Benefits for people, benefits for the planet, and benefits for our shared prosperity.
Obviously, you're working with the buses to get people off train into a bus, right? So there would be new bus lines created with this? as well?
You're absolutely going to rework the bus system. Yeah, the bus system as it is today does not take into account a reliable fast trail. It's what they call the Swiss system. So the Swiss back in the 1970s developed this system. It's just been named the Swiss system. And basically, at every rail stop, the buses, the taxis, the ride shares, they all kiss the train. When it comes to the station, everybody comes in, they kiss the train, then everybody leaves. It's called the pulse system, Swiss pulse system. That's the technical word. But it works beautifully. And that's the plan for all of California. When I actually saw the state rail plan rolled out for our region from the state Division of Mass Transit and Rail, and they showed us the timing on every stop and how the buses and everything would fit, and it's like Swiss clockwork.
So the idea is not to turn a profit; it's to get cars off the highway. Is that what we're working on?
There is no
Profit.
transportation system that
Right.
makes a profit. Not
Right.
highways, not bikeways, not sidewalks, not streets.
Right.
There isn't one that makes a profit. They all cost money.
Does the federal government pay for that?
The federal government will contribute to
the losses that are occurred through running the system?
Well, people call them losses. They're just operating expenses. It's
Right.
like there's a cost of operating everything. The difference is that the cost is, you can calculate the cost. So let's imagine an alternative to the rail, to installing a robust rail system and really giving ourselves a public transportation system that works. Let's imagine for a minute that we want to widen Highway 1. So they've looked at that. The cost of widening Highway 1 from Freedom Boulevard, for those who don't know, that's kind of like where where the congestion really begins, to the 17 interchange. The cost of that's about $800 million.
Well, they've got it almost to more SoCal.
No.
Drive.
This is new lanes.
Okay.
To increase capacity. Right?
Even make it wider down there.
To add 2 lanes to Highway 1 from Freedom to Fishhook, which would add additional capacity. Right? I think we all can agree that aux lanes don't make really much of a difference, even though we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars building those. We don't have to talk about that. I'm talking about real difference makers. Just like a train would be a real difference maker. So to get the same kind of difference made, you would have to spend, let's say, $800 million to add 2 lanes to Highway 1. But not included in that cost is the cost of all those automobiles. When you talk about the cost of those automobiles, which are externalized costs, right? You and I don't necessarily pay those because we don't necessarily commute. The people who commute and use that will use it, right? But that's still a real cost. And if you look at the cost, 50 cents a mile, which we all know that's low now, and you add up, everybody drives 10 miles, and you do that, the same capacity of a train, you're looking at $3 or $4 trillion of cost over the same cost of a train.
The study that you guys did, was there a number of the Highway 1 traffic, a percentage of what turns onto Highway 17 versus what goes straight onto Highway 1 North?
No, the Transit Corridor Alternatives Analysis did not look at the highway traffic. The study that did that was called the Unified Corridor Investment Study. That was completed in 2019. And in that study, they looked at a mix of corridors. So they had the rail corridor, Highway 1, and then the SoCal Avenue Freedom Boulevard corridor was a third transportation corridor. Most people don't think of that as a transportation corridor, but a lot of people use it. So they,
my kids went to SoCal High.
Right, a lot of people use it. And so they looked at a mix of different uses, and they optimized them. So they looked at what gives you the best bang for the buck, and what gives you the best bang for the buck with respect to the rail corridor is rail and trail. They looked at a trail-only alternative for the rail corridor, and what they did is they said, okay, if we use the rail corridor for trail only, which is what Measure D is proposing, right? That's all it's really proposing. If we do that, then we are, to get the same capacity, we have to invest in the highway, and we have to invest in SoCal and Freedom. And in order to do that, we don't get the same bang for the buck. We get an increase in vehicle miles traveled, we get an increase in greenhouse gases, we get an increase in accidents. There's 108 predicted additional accidents, 1 every 3 days in our county, if we use the corridor for rail corridor for trail only, and we expand our highways and our Freedom and SoCal. And that's a $25 million a year cost. It's not as safe. It's amazing when you start looking at things from a transportation planning perspective, and you start looking at things from what's the best way to invest your transportation money?
That's an engineering way to look at it.
Well, yes.
Right.
Engineering, you apply principles of science, you apply facts, and you do analysis, and that's how you look at it.
And you have to sell that. You're going to sell that engineering brain of yours to the public of this county. Is that
my brain is no longer for sale?
I
used to sell my brain and things like that, but I retired.
Your brain's on vacation.
It's working harder than ever, probably, but yeah.
I see a lot of talk in social media about the tourist train. Which I don't know. Are we talking about the same thing?
Well, I don't know what they're talking about. Tourist train on social media.
The one that came out and ran the electric train was a private. They're private.
That was a demonstration.
But weren't they trying to put that on and having a
No. It was strictly a demonstration. That demo train. I wasn't here for that, by the way. It's very sad to have missed it. But the purpose of that was to demonstrate what's possible. So the idea that there was a manufacturer in Southern California, California-made product, and he agreed to bring it up and just put it on our tracks for, I think it was only 2 weeks.
Using the same tracks.
Same
Yeah,
tracks.
yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely same tracks. And just show people what's possible. So the idea was just to show, because many people who live in Santa Cruz County, they've never been to London. They've never been to France. They've never been to Italy. They don't know what it's like to have a rail network as a backbone to your transportation system. So the idea was just to show people who live here what this might be like. Just an idea. And so, I don't know if you guys got a chance to see it or ride it, but it was wildly successful. People love that thing.
But this is at my house.
There's a lot of work. Isn't there a lot of work on these tracks that needs to be taken place? Are we trying to put a diamond on a pig here?
What'd you say?
We're trying to put a diamond on a pig.
Is that English?
Diamond on a pig. That must be a British thing.
Right? I mean, if you put a
Lipstick
diamond
on a pig.
if you put a diamond on a pig, you still got a pig.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're putting diamonds on pigs here.
Okay.
We're talking about investing money into creating a better, more robust, more equitable, more sustainable transportation system that serves everyone. We're not getting just a trail. We're getting a rail and a trail. We get a ways of moving people around everyone can use. You don't have to be able-bodied. You don't have to be, you don't have to own a bicycle. You don't have to. You can just hop on a train. You can get rid of a car. You can save money. You can help save the planet. We're talking about a whole shift here, not just a diamond on a pig.
Right. Okay.
I saw recently they're adding a mile of trail on the west side.
Yep. From Bay Street to the wharf. Yep.
Yeah, and it's like 16 million for that mile, I think, is what I thought I saw. If I'm not mistaken.
I think it was 12.
12?
Yeah.
Where does that money come from? Is that part of the same deal?
Let's see. I don't know the funding sources of all of them, but I think 10 million of it was a grant.
Federal government?
I think it was a state. Here's how funding works. So the federal government gives money to the state, and the state raises money of its own, and then the state distributes that money. And I don't know how many different programs there might be for funding these things, and I don't know. You'd have to call somebody at the city to explain where all the money came from. But I understand that much of it came from what's called an active transportation program, and so the idea is to invest in facilities that will improve the amount of active transportation. Active transportation is a sort of a technical term for bicycles and walking and skating. It's human-powered transportation rather than motor-powered transportation. And so that's, I think, the source of many of the funds. But it's a substantial amount. And the local match of that was very small. That local match was raised by the city of Santa Cruz itself. I think that Measure D funds were also used from 2016. So 2016 was a tax measure called Measure D. It just coincidentally has the same name as the measure on the ballot. Now, so it's always a mix of funds. Every transportation fund, every transportation project is funded with a mixture of funds: local funds, federal funds, state funds, carbon tax funds. I mean, it comes from a variety of purposes.
Interesting. My neighbor's terrified of a path on the train tracks.
He's terrified of a path on the train track?
Of a bike path. For one reason.
Oh, why?
It's going to be the new Santa Cruz homeless shelter.
Ooh, yeah. Some people are. I think that is a legitimate concern.
I've seen what's happened in Orange County.
Yep.
It's been very well
Publicized.
You can see it on the Riverwalk. I mean,
it's kind of out of sight, out of mind when it's on the corridor.
Yep.
How are we gonna? Is there a solution to that aspect of what may happen?
Ooh, I am not a sociologist.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm gonna stay out of that one, but I will offer this to you. If it was a trail only, I think it would be a much worse problem than if it was a rail and a trail. And here's why: because that train's going to be going by every so many minutes, and so you're not going to have time periods when there'll be nobody using the trail. There will always be some kind of activity, and there'll be lights on. There'll be activity. You'll have eyes on the scene. And so that kind of nefarious activity that oftentimes occurs when people don't have eyes on things be a little harder to do. I think it's better to have both.
I think it's a problem they haven't gotten to yet, TC.
Well, I don't know if they've thought about it. I have,
people have thought about it.
We've already had situations already happening the county just cleared out a big section
Oh,
between
yeah.
30th and
I'm
38th recently.
I only work on two things now that I'm retired. I only work on two things. One of them is transportation, and the other one is housing. That's it. I want more affordable housing. We need more affordable housing.
That's a different show altogether, right there.
I know, that's a whole different show. Let's not go there.
Right. No, but it's it's
but
a
they're
question-
integrated.
But it is, and it's,
They're integrated.
I mean,
No, they are. Yeah,
They're absolutely integrated.
I feel like the city of Santa Cruz would love it if downtown moved onto the rail corridor. What would the current situation with the homelessness we have in our city of Santa Cruz? If everybody pitched a tent on the rail corridor and was not at San Lorenzo Park and was not on Pacific Avenue and was not over by the Home Depot, I think a lot of people would be very happy with that. Could be out of sight, out of mind.
There might be some people that would be happy with that.
And I just feel like
I think
shopping
the
carts
solutions-
currently don't roll really well down those tracks. You know, just saying. You know, and so that's an.
I don't know what to say about
I don't
that,
know.
TG.
I don't know if they're prepared or thought enough. Who's going to police that? You know, or who's going to clean up the trash?
that's a whole.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
Well,
you know?
there's maintenance costs associated with any facility. Any public facility has a maintenance cost. And earlier today you were saying we don't have any trash cans out here, and so there's a cost for that, and we have to be willing to pay that, and that's part of the cost. In the budgeting for the trail, I'm not familiar. The rail hasn't been developed enough to understand the budgeting, but in the trail, they set aside 15% of Measure D funds were set aside for maintenance of the trail.
This is where Neil says we've talked to all the mayors, and he's going to say it right now.
Okay, go ahead. Say it, Neil.
Let it go.
It be like a book. Well, what Manu said, the thing that I remember what Manu said was, it's going to be $6 million to fix the bridge in Capitola, which, as you're probably right, they should tear the whole damn thing down.
I think it'll be more than that, but that's okay.
That's probably true. I think that's true. And then we have the money to go to Aptos and no further.
Right now?
Yeah.
Who said that?
Our supervisor, Manu Koenig.
The money to do the
Money for what?
To fix the track up.
Yeah.
Right.
Was to Watsonville. We have stops at Aptos. We
Yeah.
don't have the money to go any further than that.
Yeah, I would take issue with that.
Yeah.
Is this?
I would just disagree with that. I think that there's different ways of talking about money, and when you don't want something to happen, you talk about it in the worst possible way. And right now, I explained to you earlier that Measure D is raising money, right? And so the total amount of funds being raised by Measure D is somewhere between 700 and 800 million. So let's be conservative. Let's just say it's 700 million. 8% of that is money allocated to the rail corridor, to maintaining the rail corridor alone. That's it. It's the only thing that money can be used for. What is 8% of 700 million? I can do the math in my head. $56 million.
Right.
They've been working on it. 'Cause I walk it all the time.
Right. So they've got $56 million basically in the bank. And the cost of repairing that rail line has been estimated at between 48 and 63. Okay? But that's the total cost. That's not the local share. You have to remember that when you're talking about rail lines, and you're talking about public works infrastructure of any kind, whether it's a road or a rail line or whatever, you're not paying for that with local money only. You get grants from state agencies and federal agencies, and they help you pay for that because they have a vested interest in it.
Is that the Build Back Better deal?
Build Back Better is a source of revenue. It's a huge source of revenue, particularly for rail. I'm grateful that for lots of reasons that President Biden is our president right now, but he gets the public transit piece, and many people do. If we want to change the way we get around, if we want a more sustainable way of getting around, a more equitable way of moving people around, we got to do something different. We can't just keep doing what we're doing.
If it happens,
Yep.
we'll know in June with this. I guess this is a one and done vote on this.
Well, this is a vote. Measure D is pretty specific. Measure D is targeted at it really does just two things. It calls for removing the tracks and amending the general plan so that the only thing that can be built in the rail corridor is a trail. That's the two things it really does. When it does those things, lots of other things will happen, right? So there's ramifications
Do
of
the
those
Yes
things.
on D people say that? Do they say
No.
it's going to be a trail forever
What do
with
they
no
say?
tracks?
The Yes on D people will tell you all kinds of things, but they don't want you to know that what their measure does is amend the general plan to prevent the county from ever studying or planning for anything in the rail corridor except the trail.
But that could change in another vote.
That would take another countywide vote. Yeah,
Right. To
in
change
fact, I've heard the Greenway people say things like, Well, it's just a change to the general plan. We can do that with a 3/5 vote of the Board of Supervisors. 3 out of 5 supervisors can just say, let's change it. And that's I'll call it a lie, because that's what it is. There's language in Measure D. When they amended the general plan, there's language in Measure D that says the only way these amendments can be changed is by a general vote of the entire county of Santa Cruz.
Who wrote Measure D?
The Greenway people wrote Measure D.
Okay.
They wrote the entire thing. And I call that a poison pill.
And have you?
But you will never get them to admit that. Well, you might get them to admit it,
But how come you
but they will
haven't?
never
How
offer
come
that.
there hasn't been like a meeting between yes and no
Or debate.
to come to something that is in 14 years we can put tracks back on?
There have been many attempts at discussions between the people who want a trail only and the people who want a rail and a trail. And right now, the trail only people have essentially thrown down the gauntlet. There is no conversation. There's no opportunity for conversation. We have a measure on the ballot, and it's going to be a yes or a no. There's no negotiating. There's no compromise.
If there was negotiating, would you sit down and discuss that about
Of course,
a plan?
we've already done it. We've had these conversations. We've had years of conversations around the best use of the rail corridor. And so far, every time the topic comes up, every time it gets studied, every time people come together, every time the public comes together and talk about it, and we work on it, the final result of all of that effort is rail and trail is the best use of our rail corridor. The trail only people don't like that answer. They don't like it at all. And so they've got a measure on the ballot now.
Because I don't know if those tracks are personally the best for what we want to do with a train, or they're on top of giant gravel. I feel like there could be a more streamlined track and maybe something that's more efficient and easier to maintain.
Well, they studied all those things, TC. I mean,
But no, I get it. But
they looked at 18
my
different
point
options for that.
It's 14 years away before we put a car on those tracks.
Yep, takes time.
That's a long time.
It's a long time, but-
and we have to maintain those tracks for 14 years.
Well, that depends on what we decide to do with them.
In June.
There's different. No, the June. There's nothing on the June ballot about a rail line. There's nothing on Measure D that says we're going to increase funding for public transit. There's nothing. They love to tell you about how they're for buses. Greenway's all about improving the bus system. There's no language in Measure D about improving the bus system. Not one word. Not one penny of funding.
How old are you?
67. How old are you?
65.
Ah.
Do you think you'll ever ride a train in this county?
Ooh, I sure hope so.
You think you will?
Yeah, I think it's totally possible. Totally possible.
50
And let me tell you a story about trains and how quickly they can happen. So north of us, there's the Sonoma Marin area rail transit.
She knows.
My dad bought that. He ran the Golden Gate Bridge District for 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
He's a railway ride expert.
So that, from the time they started till the time they finished, 8 years, 42 miles, twice as big. They had to build a whole brand new bridge, a swing bridge, not just a sitting fixed bridge.
Tunnels too.
And tunnels. They built a bridge that swings out of the way. These are like huge things to do, but they can be done. It's a matter of will. We can do anything. Look, I worked with Brian Foss and the Harbor District to design the Walton Lighthouse. The Walton Lighthouse is on a pile of rocks in the ocean, right? That literally on a pile of rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And we figured out how to put a 375,000-pound lighthouse on a pile of rocks. And we got the Army Corps to sign off on it, and we got the whole thing done in like 2 years. So, I mean, it's a huge project. California Coastal Commission, Army Corps of Engineers, everybody had to sign off on it. And guess what? It happened. Why? Because we wanted it to happen. We had the will to do it. We had the political will, and we put our minds to it, and people were for it. We can do the same thing here. If we really want a better transportation system, if we really want an alternative to Highway 1, if we really want to make a more equitable, more sustainable community, we can do it. We just need to put our heads together and get it done.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Fair enough.
And if in 14 years we do it, as you said, no.
I think 12.
No train system makes a profit, right?
No train system. Well, there are private trains.
But no public
no
transportation.
public transit. Public transit is not a profit-making operation.
Is there a number of riders that will make it stay, or is it if it's empty it'll stay?
Well,
ridership is one of those things that's extraordinarily difficult to predict. You really, there's no one that can accurately predict ridership. But let me tell you a story about BART. So you guys are all familiar with BART?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you've ridden it?
Yep.
Okay, so BART's been around since 1950 something, and I think it first began operating in like 1960 something, like 62. So 3 or 4 years after BART started operating, not a lot of ridership. Everybody was complaining. It had, we'd spent all this money. They had all these studies that said it was going to do this and do that, and it wasn't doing any of the things they said it was going to do. And there was talk about scrapping it. There were people who said we should just cut our losses and give this up. This is silly. You know how many people are BART moves today? 500,000 people.
Well, ridership's way down though.
Right. The COVID hit everybody.
Right.
It put people out of business. I mean, there's really great businesses right here in Santa Cruz County that are no longer because COVID put them out of business. And COVID hit public transportation hard. Buses, trains, planes, all forms of transportation got hit hard when you got people together in a confined space. That's COVID. Those effects will go away. There is no doubt in my mind that all that ridership is going to come back and then some. And we have to keep thinking into the future. Nothing is an overnight success. Everything takes time. But where do you want to be in 20 years? Where do you want to be in 50 years? What do you want to do about climate change?
Well,
what's the answer?
I think the question will be, what's the population of Watsonville in 20 years? It's because that's a large portion of, I think, the South County's a major use of this rail corridor.
Well, then you talk about getting to
and do we want to grow? Do we want people to grow in sprawl, where you have to have a car to get where you want to go? Or do we want to have people grow along a rail line, a high capacity public transit line?
Affordable housing is going to happen though down that neck of the woods.
That's where affordable housing is going. Affordable housing is going to happen everywhere. We're building it right now in Santa Cruz. I mean, there's 100 units of public housing coming on board on the Pacific Station North. The mixed-use library building is going to add another 125 units of affordable housing. Affordable housing
still not
is being
affordable.
built.
That's like 20% below market, but it all helps.
That's actually deed-restricted affordable housing. They target it for people who are making a certain percentage of the average of the area median income. But that's a different show, right?
Yeah,
It's a different show. We can go there. I'm happy to go there.
No, it's an interesting
But that's
subject.
a different show. But you know what?
Talked to a lot of people about that.
Those two things are integrally linked. When you talk about the cost of living, there's two principal costs of living: housing, transportation. Groceries are like it fluctuates. Medical's
You want
big.
to lose it all?
Medical's
Go to the
big.
hospital.
No one is immune to that. No one's immune to that. But generally speaking, the two big costs, housing and transportation, and we can make a difference.
I'll
We can make a difference.
If the train comes in my lifetime, the train shows up here, I'll use that train if I have the connection.
good.
If I have the connections.
Excellent.
Where my end is going to be. Like, I want to go to UCSC.
Great.
From Capitola.
Perfect. What a good idea.
Am I getting there?
Hell yes. Excuse my language.
No. We can do that.
Can we?
Okay.
Okay.
So
That changes
we have an
everything.
election in June.
Yep.
People are going to vote yes. People are going to vote no.
Yep.
Win or lose, is that the final decision?
I don't think so.
Well, I think it's a very big indicator. I think it has a lot of political power.
Because there's
Yes,
powerful political people on both sides.
there are.
Yeah.
And I think that there are people who basically are saying this is the up-down vote. And I personally think that it's a down vote. I think that the people I'm talking to, let me talk about that for just a minute. I don't know how much time we have left.
We got a few minutes,
We got a few minutes. So, our camp, Greenway started back in, I don't know when they started, June. They formed their committee and they started gathering signatures, and they've had months and months and months to get public support, right? They have almost no public support.
The yes on
Yes on
D.
Yeah, Yes on D has very little public support. And it's probably, I'll give you the best and clearest example of this, the evidence of this. Most people haven't seen this yet, but it's already in the book, so to speak. The county elections department, for every election, prepares a ballot argument and a rebuttal to the ballot argument, and they create an impartial analysis. All of those documents are done. They've been done for over a month. They're posted on the County Elections Department website. You can go there today, right now. You can click on Measure D. You can read the ballot argument. You can read the rebuttal to the ballot argument.
I read it.
You can read the impartial analysis. You can read the whole text of the measure, the 30 pages of amendments to the general plan. What people should pay attention to there is the asterisks or lack of an asterisk
Which aren't signed.
after the people's signatures
Right.
on the ballot arguments. If you'll notice, and it's hard not to now that I've drawn your attention to it, every single name on the pro-Greenway side of the ballot arguments is a signature without an asterisk. And every single signature on the opposition arguments to Greenway, Measure D, have an asterisk by their name. And what that asterisk signifies is that the organization who's follows the name, for example, Mike Guth, Sierra Club, right? The Sierra Club, as an organization, has considered the measure, and the organization is opposed to Measure D. It's not just Mike Guth that's opposed to Measure D. It's the entire organization. All 10 of the signatures on the opposition, they're all organizations that have authorized that person to sign the ballot argument to announce to the entire world that that organization is opposed to Measure D. The supporters for Greenway, in spite of the fact that they've had months and months to find organizational support, not one signature on the pro-Greenway side represents an organization that supports Greenway. We have over 30 community organizations. The opposition to Greenway spans the socioeconomic spectrum, the geopolitical landscape, if you will. Businesses, labor unions, environmentalists, teachers, community groups.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, who's the Dion's?
The
husband
Dan
and wife, I think?
Dan and Jill.
They're the biggest contributors I saw.
They are.
Yeah.
And
are they local?
Very generous
local?
people. Yep.
Okay.
Local. Yep.
I wanted to just make sure because I know I've seen a lot of vicious attacks against this one guy that was a yes guy. The guy from Adobe Systems.
What?
Yeah, but
I am not.
You're outside the fundraising aspect.
No, I'm in it, but I will never criticize anybody. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's proper. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's not healthy.
Well, there's been a lot of
healthy.
There's been a
People
lot on the no
me.
side. But there's been a lot on the no side talking about this one guy about him funding it when the Dion's actually funded more out of their own pocket. And I thought, wow, that was pretty interesting because I've never heard the yes talk about the Dion's.
Oh, I have.
Well, I have, but I just find
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The truth is, it doesn't matter. Here's a reality about fundraising. I don't really know how many people have contributed to Greenway, but I know how many people have contributed to No on Greenway. We have over 700 donations to the No on Greenway campaign.
This is exciting. It's almost like a playoff.
This is amazing.
It's like a playoff game. I really feel it.
We got
I feel like, yeah.
I think the Warriors are playing right now.
Are.
I don't know how many people are watching this.
I feel the energy of this. It's like a title match. It really is. I feel like we're in Vegas and it's going to be a title match. When it's done, if win or lose, if you do lose, will you be gracious in losing?
Of course.
Okay. There's not going to be
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I feel like that's the best thing that we can do in this situation. Win or lose, walk away and be gracious.
We absolutely. In
like
all cases.
Because politics have
we must be
so
gracious because you know what? The people on the other side of this issue are my neighbors.
Right.
They're my friends. They're people I work with. They're people I play with. There is no way I'm going to let anything like this cost me a friendship.
Awesome.
No way.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, Mark, I think that's the best way to end this show.
Thank you.
I'm
in.
You know what I mean? Is to say that everybody in this county are neighbors.
That's right.
And when this thing is done and what is decided on, let's continue to be neighbors.
Absolutely.
And you know
love,
what I mean?
We have enough shit going on in the
so
world.
I think that's
right.
really important because there has been a lot of attention given to this, and I guess I feel like we're preparing for a marathon, and the no's and yes are going to run a marathon, and someone's going to get the tape at the end, and we'll hug and say good race.
There you go.
And we'll move on to something else.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Neil?
sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we got shows tomorrow. I got Tracy Weiss from O'Neill Odyssey.
Oh, okay. Don't we have Bud Miller coming on?
Bud Miller tomorrow night.
Bud Miller is coming on.
Roskop tomorrow.
Roskop?
With the French.
We got a lot of hot
French,
stuff coming up.
A lot of shows. We have 4 shows tomorrow, TC.
Thank you for coming on the show, Mark. I really appreciate it. A website, people can, I know there's a No on D website.
It's really easy. No Way Green Way. All
Easy
one
as
word,
that.
all lowercase.com.
Right.
That'll take you right to the No Way Green Way campaign website. We would welcome anyone who wants to volunteer. We would welcome anyone who wants to endorse our campaign. The endorsements are swelling. It's just amazing how much momentum we're picking up.
This is big attention.
And we need cash.
All right.
I'm not going to pretend like we are a well-funded campaign. We are not a well-funded campaign. I think the paper reported that Yes Greenway had about twice as much money as we did. I'm not surprised.
Well, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I really
and,
enjoyed meeting both of you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was a great conversation, and it's always good to inform the community.
That's why we do this show. Is we're recording history, and we like to share this community because Neil and I love it so much. And so,
I'm right there with you, man.
Again, everybody, thank you for tuning in. T-Fox, thanks for having us on Santa Cruz Waves. Everybody on Santa Cruz Waves, you can see this on YouTube, Spotify.
YouTube.
We'll have it on there in no time at all. You can share it. You can tell your friends to be involved and pay attention to this Green Way situation. No or yes on D. You take your pick. But most importantly, vote. Vote.
Absolutely.
That is the most important thing you can do. And we will
Here,
see
here.
you next time, Neil,
Tomorrow.
on the Off the Lip Radio Show.
Thanks,
Good night,
buddy.
everybody. Woo!